Hello and welcome to the 27 Minutes of Heaven we call the D1 Baseball Podcast. We are coming to you live from Omaha, Nebraska. I'm your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. I want to say thank you first to our good friends at Wilson. If you are in Omaha this week, you've got to visit the Omaha Experience. It's right across from the ballpark. You'll find Evo Shield, Louisville Slugger, DeMarini, Wilson, all under one roof. Limited edition gloves, bats, gear, and more. It's available only during the College World Series here in Omaha. This place is like a wonderland if you like baseball swag and gear. So get yourself over here. I am joined by just an incredible trifecta. Kendall J. Rogers, Zebby Barrels, Aaron J. Fitt, and the great owner-operator of the Joe's, Joseph J. Healy. Gentlemen, good morning. I never know where to go with Joe. He's a kind of a Renaissance man. Yeah, let's not do that. Yeah, that's why we have a pen and paper here. But Joe's he's a Renaissance man. I could go, the host of Weekend Waypoints. I could go owner operator of the Joe's.
Sure.
Gentlemen, it's good to you guys are part of every day of my life because of threads and chats and Zoom calls. But now we're in person. This is awesome. So let's talk about the College World Series here. I want to do overviews, and you guys can steer this. Clearly, you guys are good at that. But here's the question. 4 ACC teams, 4 SEC teams. Is that good for the sport? It's a pretty wide open question. Kendall, you go first. Is it good?
I don't think it's like good or bad. I mean, here's the thing. Like, people say, "Oh, this is really bad for the sport." I mean, if you look at some of these teams in this field, they had to get through teams from other parts of the country to get here. So it's not like one of those things where some deal where they were all just given some clean, easy pathway to get to Omaha. So those teams earned the right to be here. They weren't just given some easy pathway to get here. So I don't really think it's good or bad. From a sheer viewership standpoint, it's probably really good.
Yeah.
Because you've got a lot of power programs. Obviously, NC State and North Carolina both being here is going to draw really well. In the Carolinas, A&M being here is going to draw well in Texas, et cetera. So, I'm kind of indifferent on it. Like, I don't think it's good or bad. I think saying it's really good or it's really bad, I think it's just a little dramatic.
Yeah. Fitzy, let me steer you a little bit with this. And again, you could go wherever you want. I want your key thought. So I think it's actually, to Kendall's point, I think it's awesome for this reason. No, if you told me it's only 2 out of the 30 leagues every single year, I would say, no, I don't want to sign up for that year after year after year. However, I think Wake Forest last year really, they really stood up to the SEC teams. Now, LSU ultimately beat them, but it was so even. And then I think these 4 ACC teams really look ready to stand up. I don't want to paint the SEC as bullies in college baseball, but they kind of are, right? They've dominated the sport. And I think this, if I'm another league, the ACC feels like, dang, if they can do it, why can't we do it?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we do need someone to stand up to the SEC because they have dominated. Absolutely, they have. And I do think for the sake of the sport, we need, I think, a rival conference, and the ACC is clearly in the position to do that. Not just because of this year with having 4 teams in Omaha. I mean, they're the closest to the SEC. There's still a significant gap there overall. But I'll say this too. I think across the country, other regions, other conferences, there are a lot of people who are turned off by this field. There are people who are disillusioned and just really, frankly, resentful of the SEC and the ACC. They're resentful of the fact that they got all these host teams. And so no wonder they have so many teams in Omaha. And I get that. And I understand, but ultimately, like Kendall said, they did earn their way here, and they earned their way to those host spots by the seasons that they had. It's not like they get all those host spots every year. I mean, they do get more, than other leagues most years, but I mean, they had a lot this year because they had great seasons. And I thought it was clear for most of the year that this year in 2024, the ACC and SEC were the 2 best leagues, and there was a pretty big gap, between them and the rest of the country. So I just think that bared itself out. Now, again, if this continues every year and we don't have any more teams from, the West or any more teams or mid-majors or whoever get here, I think that would be a shame for our game. But I don't think this is going to happen every year. I do think that, yes, it reflects the trend that the balance of power has shifted toward the Southeast, but that doesn't mean we're going to be stuck with this reality forever.
Yep. Kendall, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, the thing about, people argue about Florida and the SEC getting too many teams in, but the validation on Florida is the fact that they got into the tournament. They went to O'Brien, shut Oklahoma State's offense down, which is not easy to do. We've all seen that. And then they go to Clemson and win that super regional. So, I mean, at the end of the day, resume-wise, they might not should have been in the field, but I mean, they earned it by going to two of the toughest places in the country and winning mano a mano.
Yeah, I say this jokingly, but yeah, Kevin O'Sullivan could learn to share better, though, right?
Yeah.
Like 9 Omahas
The mayor
in 14
of Omaha.
years. Yeah,
He told me yesterday he doesn't think about that. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you don't.
Everybody else is thinking about it. Yes. Joe, what say you on this topic?
Yeah, I think Aaron makes a good point that, if this was something that was happening, if this was the 5th time in 7 years this had happened, then yeah, I mean, maybe we'd, need to raise some red flags about it. But I think it's just, again, a reflection of this season. I don't think it's necessarily any reason for worry in the big picture. However, I will say, I do think it is, and this is a conversation we can't really open the box to today, but I mean, it is a symptom of an unhealthy collegiate sports ecosystem that, we know that's unhealthy. Like, and it's not just baseball, right? It's every collegiate sport. So I do think this is yet another symptom of that. But as a one-off, like, no, I don't really necessarily think a lot of it's just the way the bracket fell, right? I mean, the SEC had a bunch of national seeds and then no other hosts. And then the ACC had a bunch of, I think the bracket just broke in such a way where it allowed this to happen. I think it's another factor.
Yeah, and it's not like, these teams didn't knock each other off en route. I mean, all 5 ACC hosts had to beat an SEC 2 seed in their regionals, to get here. So it's not like people in the West are going to complain about how the West is just knocking each other off. And yeah, that happens. But it also happens, with the ACC and SEC teams winnowing each other out.
Yep. All right, let's transition. Joe, I elected not to have coffee or one of Fitzy's Monster 7000 drinks this morning. But I didn't know you were going to use the word ecosystem, and I may have a hamstring sprain right now. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes. Yeah. Kendall, let's do so we're gonna do 2 types of players. First one I want you guys to talk about is who's a player you like. I'm using the word fun. Like, who's a player you're just excited to watch play in this tournament. The next player, when we come back around, will be a player that you think is pivotal to this College World Series. Give me your fun player first.
Well, since Aaron blocks me out of North Carolina, I have not actually seen Vance Honeycutt in person this year. So, we've talked about it so many times already, just about him in this ballpark. But his ability to just make awesome plays, go into the gaps, like, he fits this ballpark perfectly. And honestly, like, he might be the key for North Carolina overall, obviously because of his offense and his power potential, but just his ability to track down every ball in the gap here, because the gaps here are massive. So I just think watching him go in the gaps is going to be a lot of fun.
Fitzy?
Yeah, and for me, I'm going to throw this right back at Kendall. He doesn't let me into the state of Texas, so I haven't gotten to see the Aggies in person. I'm very excited to see, the star players there, Jace Laviolette, Gavin Grahovic. I mean, these are 2 guys that Kendall's been raving about for so long now. I just can't wait to get a look at these guys on the big stage. They're obviously superstars, and let's see if the superstars will shine out here in the big stage.
I think I'm going to go. I just forgot who I was going to pick.
You got a cheat sheet right here.
There's a guy named Jack Caglione.
That's who. Jack I mean, we shouldn't get through this panel without talking about with Jack Caglione, right? I mean, he's the ultimate test for this ballpark. I know this ballpark is not the ballpark it was in 2013. However, it is still, a bigger ballpark than what we see in the college game most often. And seeing him against this ballpark is kind of a fun test in and of itself. He's not just playing the pitcher. He's also playing the ballpark a little bit. And, Rooney, you alluded to it a couple days ago or yesterday, I forget which, was just that, does he catch Charlie Condon here? He's 4 home runs shy. Like, that would mean Florida's here a while. That would mean he's having a heck of a College World Series. So that would be fun if he can make a push for that to win the home run crown again.
Yeah, I just think Jack Caglione, to your point, Joe, like, we can't not talk about him. The more I think about Jack Caglione, the more I feel like, and again, no offense to Charlie Condon or Travis Bazan or Christian Moore, all these guys, but Caglione is just that is a freak show. Like, this dude is 6'5", 250 pounds. Like, you could put him in an NFL game as a tight end and no one would catch it. Like, you could sneak him into the game. And then, the 30-game hitting streak is just bonkers. Like, for me, hitting streaks are for little guys. Like, that's for, like, Pete Rose and Tony Gwynn, not guys that hit bombs like he does. And, what was it, 9 straight games with a home run? And so, to me, he's like the ultimate litmus test for this park as far as, how's it going to play this week? And then also, Clemson last week, for him, they clearly were trying to minimize him. He's still at 5 RBIs. Now, again, this Florida's team feels less scary in this park than they did at Clemson. They felt like just a monster sitting there.
Well, the one thing about Florida is, like, when teams have tried to pitch around Jack, like, their offense is doing some damage. It's not one of those things where you can walk him and, like, it's like, oh, you're good. their offense around him has done some damage. So that's made them pretty dangerous. And you mentioned Christian Moore. I mean, he's the other obvious one, right? I mean, SEC Triple Crown winner. The job that he did this year offensively, seeing him in this ballpark. Blake Burke as well.
Yeah.
Can Blake Burke hit a ball out of this ballpark, like literally out of the ballpark? We'll
huge.
find out. Yeah.
These players are so big. So I'll pick, and then we'll go to a key player. Griff O'Farrell, I get to interview yesterday, and like Virginia's position player group is so big and physical and impressive. Griff O'Farrell looks like a tiny person on the field. He's actually not small at all. He's like 6'1", 6'2". Like Mike Farron and I interviewed him. He's very impressive, and I was like, man, it felt like who's the basketball point guard from Canada, played at Santa Clara?
Steve Nash.
Steve Nash. I always thought he was tiny, and I find out he's 6'3". That's Griff O'Farrell for me. Kendall, give me a player that you think will be pivotal in this World Series.
From each bracket or just overall?
No, just overall.
Well, just kind of along the lines of A&M, just because I've seen in the last couple of weeks, is Chris Cortez. I mean, it sounds like A&M is probably going to, whether it's tomorrow or the next game, if a starter gets in trouble, they're going to go straight to him. And he's one of those guys, man. Like, if you look at what he did against Florida earlier this year, was ultra impressive. Last weekend was 99 to 100 on the 91st and 92nd pitch. The slider was up to 91 last week. The changeup was 89, 91. The stuff has been electric. And for him, he's one of those guys, if he's locked in, if he's commanding, I mean, he's almost unhittable. And so the key for me is, can teams lay off his pitches? Because he's going to throw some balls. And so that's going to be the big key, is like, can he command enough, and can teams lay off the stuff that's out of the zone?
Yep. Fitzy?
I'm going to go with Jamie Arnold here, guys, because to me, this is the most fascinating matchup we've got here. Is Jamie Arnold against Tennessee, the best offense in the country, the best pitcher left in the field. I mean, there's only one of these guys in this field this year, a dude, right? Like we had last year, Skeens and Louder. He's Skeens and Louder this year. He's not, maybe quite to that degree, but I mean, he's the one guy that you run out here who's like, he's going to be a first round pick, a high first round pick, might be 1-1 next year. I heard something about his cut on his thumb. I wonder if that's going to be any kind of a factor. That's kind of just an X factor. But if they can go out there and beat Tennessee with Arnold on the mound, that kind of changes the whole complexion of that bracket and really the entire World Series. And so, and then, you get a chance in this format to bring him back, once or twice more over the course, if they can make a deep run. And so for me, I just think that's such a great advantage as a starting point for a College World Series team, is to have that dude.
Joe.
First of all, Runes, describing Steve Nash as the Canadian point guard who went to Santa Clara is like the most roundabout way to explain.
My
Steve
brain
Nash.
was really
Show some respect, man. Put some respect on that name.
It was like,
come on, man.
Verbal Wikipedia page right there.
Back-to-back
Steve
NBA
Nash guy. Remember him?
Yeah.
When the MVP
He was okay.
players.
He was a decent basketball player.
That little guy, he played at Santa Clara.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's no Spud Webb.
It was like putting jumper cables on my brain there for a second. It was goodness.
I'm going to go with a position group. It's the entire Kentucky bullpen. What they did against Oregon State, I think, super impressive. I wasn't on the podcast with you guys recapping supers, but like that was one of the things that stood out to me from that weekend, was just that, I mean, that's not just Travis Pizzana and some guys. Like, that's a pretty good lineup, and Kentucky starting pitching and their bullpen really came through and held them to whatever it was it 3 hits all weekend, something like that. Something nuts.
Yeah, three.
Yeah, and so that's been the thing for Kentucky, is when they get good relief work, they tend to have a lot of success. When they've hit skids this season, it's been when they just can't find somebody to trust, and they're just cycling through guys rapid fire. How that unit does here, I think, is going to have a lot to do with how far Kentucky goes.
Yeah, that's well said. I'm going to pick Drew Beam of Tennessee. That's
one.
Pat James gave me that one this morning, where his numbers aren't great over his last 5 starts, it sounds like, but maybe this ballpark is perfect for Drew Beam. And I do think Tennessee is very capable of winning the whole thing, but not without Drew Beam winning games, right? Like, he's going to have to win some games.
Well, kind of like what Aaron said with Jamie Arnold, like Drew Beam, and I guess you could throw Ryan Prager in there too, or like the other 2 guys that you consider, like, when they're really on, they're premium arms. And, Prager's a little different than Beam and Jamie, but, the point stands.
Yep. All right, let's preview the games in a second. Just want to say, throughout the College World Series, throughout the summer and all year round, D1Baseball.com is your home for the most in-depth college baseball news, updates, scores, and rankings. Get game analysis, series previews, transfer portal updates, and so much more. Visit D1Baseball.com today. All right, so let's preview the games here. Kendall, tell me, let's each of us give a quick thought. Let's do UNC Virginia. We believe the starter will be Evan Blanco for Virginia versus the freshman Jason DeCaro for North Carolina.
Yeah, I'm going to ride North Carolina here. I've watched them a lot over the last couple of weeks from afar, and man, I just love all of their qualities. I like their starters. I like how they can mix and match out of the bullpen. I like what they're doing defensively. They're getting every single key hit, and when you watch teams like that, you got a team of destiny filled with North Carolina, and I'm going to ride them in this game against Virginia. Obviously, a lot of familiarity there, but North Carolina looks great.
Hey, by the way, what happened in the series in the regular season? Anybody?
I was just
remember
thinking about that. I was trying to remember.
Yeah, didn't
Pat UVA? That was in Charlottesville, though, right? Yeah.
North Carolina won 2 out of 3?
Virginia
did.
What I thought.
They held serve at home. Got it.
100 years ago.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I think these two teams are pretty evenly matched. Virginia is
Very.
so offensive, and athletic as well. And you mentioned the O'Farrell factor. It's just the best defensive shortstop in the country versus you got the best defensive center fielder in the country. So you got strengths up the middle here. Good behind the plate. I mean, both these teams. Jacob Ferentz has been awesome, and Luke Stevenson has been awesome as a freshman for UNC. So, I think the position player groups are outstanding. Really interested to see Evan Blanco match up against that Carolina offense. I mean, I've talked about this a lot, but they're just so balanced, right, left, right, all the way through. But he's got a good changeup, that I think is a weapon against those right-handed hitters. I wonder about his splits. He might even be just as effective against righties as lefties, it feels like. So, he's been really good for him. He's really come on. But, I mean, he kind of reminds me a lot of Shea Sprague for UNC, who's not going to pitch in this game, but similar style, like kind of 88 to 90 lefty with a really good changeup, advanced field of pitch. I mean, those guys still play out here in this ballpark and in college baseball in general. And so, but Carolina has such an advantage of the bullpen for me even though Virginia's bullpen has come along just like the rest of their staff. I just think Dalton Pence in particular, out here, I mean, when you're playing every other day to start with, they're going to see him, use him every game for probably multiple innings. But I mean, you also have Mateus and Poston and, Peterson. I mean, that quartet is just the best quartet in this field as far as the bullpen goes. And so I still like that a lot. And I'm going with North Carolina in this matchup.
Joe.
First of all, the O'Farrell factor is a great podcast name.
That is.
For sure.
If he's not thinking about
that'll be
that,
a political
he needs
podcast
to.
someday,
Just let
right?
Steven know.
Yeah, the O'Farrell factor. I like Virginia here, and honestly, I think part of why I like that is because because of the advantage North Carolina has in the bullpen, I think their relative advantage, if they lose this game, their relative advantage over everyone else as they come through the losers bracket will be big because of that bullpen. So I kind of have a feeling about Virginia winning this game, but actually North Carolina maybe advancing further as time goes on because of that bullpen. But I think the combination of Evan Blanco, who I think my hunch is that he will perform well here. You also have the X factor of how does Jason DeCaro handle the moment, right? He's shown no signs of being afraid of the moment this season, or else he wouldn't be where he's at. But this is a different beast. This is a different animal, So how does he deal with that? So I like Virginia today, though I think I might like North Carolina in the long run here, just because I'm not. How does Virginia's pitching hold up the next couple of days once they get past Blanco?
Yep. And I think as we try to handicap these games, it gets me more excited for the field because it's so hard. These teams are so good. I think what's interesting to me about Virginia is that their position player group was not the normal version of themselves in the postseason. What if they get going again here in Omaha? If this pitching staff is going to be what it was in the postseason, which was way better than when it was in the regular season. Now, to be clear, way healthier too than what they were. Joe Savino's healthier. Jay Woolfolk, that's really not health as much as just kind of found a groove. And so I'm going to recuse myself from making a pick since I have ACC network assignments. That would probably be
the man of the people over here.
Yeah, that's right. That would be don't want to anger half the audience.
What a pro.
Yeah, that would be bad. But I think it's an awesome matchup. Good, Fitzy.
And all of this too. I mean, I feel like at some point, North Carolina's bats, I mean, they've found ways to kind of win and scrap and claw and like get these dramatic hits. You wonder if that's sustainable, but I would say, they're capable of scoring at a higher clip than they have in the postseason as well. And that's why they've had to rally late, is because they haven't really been swinging the bats to their normal level, I think, earlier in the game. And so both these teams, let's see, if they can get their offenses alive here in Omaha.
Runes, let's do this. Blink once for North Carolina, twice for Virginia.
That's right. I have to
wink at me twice.
Yeah, I'll predict in code. So, all right. Before we get to game game number 2 of the day. You can hear more from D1 Baseball with the D1 Baseball podcast all year round. Myself, Kendall, Fitzy, Joe, we break down teams, we talk with coaches, we keep you up to date on all things college baseball. Plus, you can hear exclusive SEC content with the Highway to Hoover podcast, which was incredibly named, ACC content with the ACC Baseball, etc. Podcast with Danny Graves and Darren Vaught, our good friends.
Named.
Yeah, less well named. That's right. The heels versus the baby faces there. All the oddities in college baseball with the Shock Factor podcast. That was whoever wrote this copy, the oddities of the Shock Factor podcast. That was well done. Pat James, if you did that, bravo. So download the D1 Baseball podcast. It's part of the SiriusXM podcast network. It's on the SiriusXM app or wherever you listen to your podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a minute of the action.
I would argue that Stephen Shock is the oddity in college baseball.
Right. He's like the Kentucky baseball of the podcast space. Let's get weird.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. All right, boys, let's talk about Florida State versus Tennessee. Kendall, before you tee me up, this is another great nugget from a conversation with Pat James this morning. Who needs coffee when you can just visit with Pat James in the lobby?
Such a good point.
Yes.
Such a good
He's
point.
a human coffee cup.
Yeah, that's right. So Tennessee, in their last 3 trips to the College World Series, here are the starting pitchers they've faced. Andrew Abbott, Paul Skeens, Jamie Arnold. How are you feeling?
Ouch.
That's
Not
a tough
great,
road,
right?
tough road.
Yeah, it's like, so Kendall, tell us about Florida State and Tennessee.
Yeah, so Aaron mentioned the thumb thing or the cut finger with Jamie Arnold. I'm kind of curious to see how that affects him. I'm kind of of the belief it won't affect him too much, really. I don't know. I mean, we don't know the severity of that, but at any rate, even with healthy Jamie Arnold, I'll still stick with Tennessee. They were my bracket pick coming into this thing, and I think obviously they'll probably start with Stamos at the front end. Like they've done all year long, they'll go to AJ Causey after that. And, every time I've seen Causey this year, like he's kind of got that invisible, like it's really difficult for teams to square him up. It's such a different look. And I think that'll be effective against Florida State's lineup in this ballpark. Florida State has a lot of power, but I mean, let's just say the dimensions at their ballpark are not the same as Omaha. So I'm kind of curious to see how their offense fares in this ballpark. I think it's a great offense, but I'm curious to see how they fare in this ballpark from a power standpoint. But at any rate, I still like Causey against their lineup in the long run. And I also just like Tennessee's lineup. We talk so much about their ability to the long ball, but if you look at their offense top to bottom, it's a pretty efficient offense, frankly. Mm-hmm. So I like Tennessee here.
Obviously, both these teams play in very homer-friendly home parks, and you can't hit home runs here now. But again, it's you need to be able to play a varied style. And I will say this too for Florida State, I think their defense is underappreciated because they're really good, and they put a real emphasis on improving that area this year because it was so bad last year. I think they're feeling 979. They take good care of the baseball. Daniel Cantu at first base. I think I mentioned this on another show, but I mean, he saves all those infielders, a lot of errors. He's really good. Lodis and Farrow up the middle, and Cam Smith has improved. And I think, it's not, for me, it's not quite North Carolina's defense in the outfield, or you don't have maybe a Griffo Farrell. Like there's some things that aren't premium, but all the way around, I think they're rock solid. And I think that matters. I think their patient approach will play. I think that their offense is just really hot, and that's one thing that I kind of look for when I'm picking teams heading into Omaha. The teams that are coming on in a real role. I know that maybe they didn't have the same assignment that some of the other teams had, but UConn is good though. They have arms and
pressed them.
Florida State just blitzed them. They played great in the regional, and they really look good in the ACC tournament. I think their offense is running at peak efficiency, and I think their bullpen is better maybe than people think too, because it's one of those things where it's like the numbers don't quite reflect, I think, how good their bullpen can be when they got a bunch of guys who can spin the heck out of it. I think that's from the right side and the left side. I think of John Abraham and Connor Holtz. I mean, guys that can match up with you, in a big spot against a Christian Moore or Blake Burke. And so I went out on a limb. I picked Florida State to win the whole enchilada. So I'm going to pick them to win this game as well.
Okay.
And Joe, I don't know if you caught that sly move by Fitzy, but he just Topper Harley'd you. He took your ecosystem and went peak efficiency on top of it. So
I appreciate the Topper Harley reference.
Yes, thank you. Your play, sir.
I would also like to say that I'm operating at peak efficiency.
That's right. Well said. We know Pat James is operating at peak efficiency. That's been established.
His hair definitely is.
Yes. Amen.
Yeah. Just give us a twirl, Pat. Give us a. So what are we talking about?
Florida State, Tennessee.
Yeah. So this is going to be the most cliche thing that's ever been said, but I promise I have a reason for saying it.
You hope everybody has fun.
I hope, and you get fresh air and good exercise.
Yes,
that's really what I'm
gotta
looking
have
for. The first few innings of this game are going to be extremely important, but I say that because if Chris Stamos gives Tennessee 2 or 3 solid innings and Tennessee is winning the game at that point, when Causey comes in, that might be a wrap. You know, so the games in which this little piggyback thing they're doing have gotten a little off kilter is when you can get Stamos out of the game really early, like first inning early, because then Causey's in a situation where he could finish it, but probably not, right? So they're going to have to go to someone else. Now, those someone else's are still pretty good. It could be Kirby Cannell, it could be Aaron Combs, but you know, if you can get them off schedule on the mound, like you've got a shot. But if it's the 4th inning and here comes Causey and Tennessee's up 3-1, like that's just tough. Because if you haven't watched AJ Causey, like it's a unique look. Like everything is moving. You know, nobody feels comfortable. And
it's not soft either.
It's not soft either.
Yeah.
It's not sloppy and moving all over. I mean, it's real firm. So I have Tennessee to win this whole thing. So obviously it stands to reason I'm going Tennessee here, but the script to not having Tennessee win is for Florida State to ambush Stamos and be in a situation where Tennessee has to figure something else out.
I love it. I think one of my overarching theme on this deal is Tennessee is on such a 4-year heater. It's remarkable. You know, like this is their 3rd trip here in 4 years. The trip they missed was the team that won 57 games.
Right.
You know, like that, and you know, so they've been the number 1 overall seed twice in 3 years. So how much does that pedigree play out here, where Tennessee just kind of like, it feels like the Yankees rolling in here? And for Florida State, sentimentally, you know, would that be wild for them to win the national title finally in the year that Mike Martin passed? You know, obviously passed the legend 11, passed on February 1st. So yeah, just another you know, bunch of the cool storylines. So, and by the way, 4 elite uniforms in this game. So gentlemen, it was a pleasure. For everyone, enjoy your trip to Omaha. Make sure you get here to the Wilson Experience over in the Village. And that's it. We will catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.